And there is going to be this Cambrian explosion of fun, weird, cool stuff again, which is super exciting because we have been stuck in a rut, I think, on the internet. And I think we're going to get weird again.
100%. I like get weird as the
Get weird. Call to arms.
Get weird.
Welcome back, everyone, to Astral's AI Founders Roundtable. Today we have a very special episode, which is kind of bittersweet because it's our last show of the series. I'm here with the co-founders of Astral, Jack Bogdan and Stephanie Pereira, and they have some big news to share about the future of the company and the platform. Plus, we're going to dig into what they've learned along the way in building and running a startup in the AI space, why they still believe in the bets that they made, and what's next for their entrepreneurial journey. Without further ado, let's get into it. Jack and Stephanie, thank you so much for taking the time to unpack your brains. I know this transition is probably super busy, but yeah, really excited to talk to you today.
Well, Zach, I just want to say it has been a real pleasure on these little podcasts. It's been great to kind of dig into all these different topics. And yeah, running a company is really hard and there's a lot of lessons learned. So I'm excited to dig into it.
Awesome. Well, we'll start with some of the easy stuff and then we'll probably get into more of the heavier stuff and startup learnings. But I'm curious, because I don't know if we've talked about this, but like, what was that initial aha moment that made you start Astral in the first place? What pain points were you seeing that you felt like AI and LLMs could totally solve this?
When we were working on our previous company, Telly, our focus was really on small businesses and creators having a home on the web where they can kind of better own their audience and build a real monetization framework around what they do so that they can grow and sustain their creative passions. And we didn't quite get there. We had a lot of creators on the platform. We had over 50,000 using it, but what we didn't see fit in getting their audiences over the hump of actually paying them for their creative craft. But we did see fit when it came to experts and entrepreneurs that trafficked in their knowledge and expertise. They're like, okay, there's a real focus here where not only are people interested in and engaged around this content, but then they're also already trained to pay for it because they respect this person's point of view and they believe in their take on how to solve a specific problem in their space. And so we were like, okay, that's a really interesting learning. And then building on top of that, just reading the tea leaves, looking at how things had progressed. I mean, it was still honestly fairly early days in the kind of public chat GPT side of all of this stuff, but it felt existential, right? Looking at it, it was like, okay, these are a bunch of independent small businesses and entrepreneurs that are incredibly well versed in something specific in their own niche. And all these models are going to go scrape everything they've ever said off the internet and then basically remove them from the conversation. And there were kind of two aspects of that we didn't like. One, we're of the kind of firm belief that any of this tech should be empowering real people, and that the whole reason why there was an audience for this entrepreneur in the first place is because they had established a very clear point of view. So rather than having all their material taken in by these models and then essentially given right back to their customers without that human touch and without getting somebody to build that relationship, we were looking at exploring all the options where we could build tools that help audiences directly connect with that expert, and that expert to not only take that material that they already have, but find new ways to essentially grow their business from it. And that was kind of the brief. Like, how can you apply this technology in a way that supported independent small businesses and experts to scale what they do rather than having some giant tech company build a barrier between them and their audience? And that was it. That was it. We didn't know exactly what that looked like. We had a bunch of different ideas around ways to manage it, but that was the kind of core nugget of it.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. Well said, by the way. Stephanie, anything to add to that backstory?
Yeah, I mean, I clearly remember Jack firing off a series of urgent tweets about the big tech companies coming for your data and being really kind of fired up about the opportunity to retain that IP and value for yourself. I guess I would maybe add thinking about how to not just retain the value, but also build on it. So I think, in our earliest experiments, we did the chatbot use case. We said, how do we turn your expertise to an always on machine that can answer the 10 questions you get again and again? And how do we help you monetize that? I remember our initial website said something like, stop leaving money on the table. And it got a huge response. People were just really excited about that. They're like, yeah, I am leaving money on the table. I don't want to trade my time for dollars. That doesn't make sense. And when we surveyed our early signups, they were excited about AI and they were excited about how AI could transform the way that they build their businesses. And I think even as our product has changed, that has remained the truth all along the way.
Love it. Yeah, the product definitely seems to have evolved over the years as well. Just for people at home, especially those looking to build something in the AI space, what was that roller coaster like in terms of pivoting and changing what the offer is, especially with how fast AI is moving?
I think like the lessons learned in Astral apply in every phase of just in that 0 to 1, trying to find fit and kind of build with customers. I mentioned earlier we had been building and working on this kind of site builder home online product for creators and small businesses. And it's the same kind of set of experimentation that you do with those audiences. And as you find more fit or connection, it's kind of doubling down on that and, measuring and making sure that you're driving the right value for people, because that's the only thing that matters is, are you meeting the needs of customers? Let's just take some of the experiments you ran on the Astral side. MVP, get something up and running really quickly was, let's get a RAG implementation up where we can bring in a bunch of content and have people get really high quality responses from it, and have that be tuned where you could actually serve it with volume and get it working with, some of the lower cost models at the time. And we did that. We said, okay, great. Let's try and get this up. Let's get some data. Let's see if there's value here. We built an option that you could link directly to. So it wasn't embeddable or anything at the time. It was more of a destination. And we saw some real fit with some creators. We saw some audiences really going to it often and asking questions, especially when it came to folks that talked more about interpersonal kind of things as far as their expertise. And that we found that really fascinating. We ran a test to the point of, Stephanie made earlier around finding kind of new revenue streams and scaling beyond just booking your time. We added a paywall into those experiences just for someone to test out. Like, okay, great, you can get this number of questions for free. And then beyond that, you've got to pay and upgrade. And again, interesting test. Like it very much mirrored the same kind of behavior we saw where there was some pickup for folks that were deeply engaged around specific topics. But then with a lot of the other folks who were testing with, it didn't really make sense. And ultimately, we found that the value for experts at that phase was really in the data itself. What is your audience coming to you for? And we thought, okay, well, there's a really big opportunity around that, because you can't run a survey all the time around what people are interested in, right? You're, divining, oh, we're getting a lot of traffic to this page, or I'm seeing a lot of listens on this podcast episode, or, oh, this is just in the zeitgeist. This is a thing I should address. But when you hear it directly from your audience, because you're able to just see what kinds of questions are being asked, that's super powerful. And we were like, okay, great. New data point. How do we get the most questions into the system that we can so that we provide the most value back to experts? And so we went in and added created an embed and made that experience that was, once just a single link, go now directly living on that site. And we tested with that. And we were like, okay, this is interesting. We're seeing more engagement now in some of these destinations, but couple things. One, whether somebody gets traffic directly to their website is highly variable. And especially with the search engine changes, like traffic really took a hit. Having that be a dedicated spot was a little complicated. And then, depending on what kind of business you are, you might have a support bot, or you might have some other kind of embed that's tied to a promotion or some other part of your stack. And so how do you live on a site where there might be more than one embedded experience, and then which one is more valuable, the thing that's driving sales directly or the thing that lets your audience, more accessibly interact with you and then hopefully have that drive some action? So we continued to experiment. We added some improvements. We ran a few tests that were pretty cutting edge at the time. Honestly, still cutting edge. I don't think a lot of people are playing in the space, but we basically dynamically generated social feeds from libraries. So we would say, okay, we have all this material. What if we pulled out really valuable nuggets and turn it into something that people could use as discovery if they don't necessarily know what questions to ask or what to dig into? And that could be their entry point. And along the way, if somebody asks a question or if somebody goes deeper, let's promote the right thing from your e-commerce stack to them. Oh, are you offering paid consultations? Are you offering a course? Are you offering a digital product? Are you offering a physical product? Whatever that was, if somebody asked a question, we should pair the right follow-up for that. And again, all this was in service of, for experts, making their content and libraries more accessible, for their audiences, giving them the best, highest quality responses that weren't just from the general model, but were from specific people they trusted. And along the way, capturing information for experts, and then also promoting the kinds of products that you want to promote to folks that are deeply engaged with what you do, capturing leads, things like that. So we ran that test, and again, it was this kind of battle of engagement because we lived on someone's site, which is great. So it's already kind of a qualified touch point because you know whose website you're on. But with the kind of variability of the web market, it just got really tough around open rates, engagement rates, et cetera. So we were like, okay, let's kind of step back and reevaluate where we can add the most value. And that content transformation piece, really, that initial test we ran to kind of find key quotes and pull out these summaries, and we had all kinds of different formats, like AMA style formats, like questions and answers. It was really cool. That opened up like an aha moment for us and our customers because they were already using Astral as a public facing tool and an internal tool. We know because they would tell us, like, oh yeah, I was trying to create new push notifications, or I was trying to write a new article, I was trying to do X, Y, or Z, and I went to Astral first because it knew where everything was. And we're like, okay, well, that's really interesting. So we kind of built on that and started experimenting with content transformation and how we can kind of add that additional value from the library. And it was when we tried to get really ambitious with content transformation that we realized we needed a new way of building with, just our whole, dev pipeline. And that's what led to the workflow engine, which is the kind of last piece of the puzzle, which was how do you make it really easy to build all these logic flows that we had previously just been doing in code, but actually make it a lot faster and simpler for anyone on the team to go through and build. So it's a lot. There's a lot there, but that just transparently, that is what happens. That is the series of discussions and conversations that we've had along the way.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So the content remix, content transformation tool turned into realizing, oh, this underlying workflow engine that powers all of these remixes and all these various templated outputs could be the bigger solution for people, right? It sounds like remixing is just one expression of what these AI workflows can handle.
Totally. I mean, honestly, it was born from the pain that we went through in building out that social feed product. So the biggest pain point of that was the fact that we were trying to balance input from non-engineers and the engineers who were implementing it. And I've mentioned this before, but working with all these models requires a unique blend of both engineering and the humanities. Like you need to be well versed in both to have the most high quality results that reflect what good looks like from a discerning person that interacts with that output all the time, whether that's a course or whether that's a worksheet or whether that's a blog post or a press release, whatever. Just asking for something with a single shot prompt is going to be highly variable. But when you can tune it to really adapt to the best of what people bring to the table when they're not necessarily engineering minded, but they really understand quality material and content and the kind of implementation logic and systems logic of engineering, that's the sweet spot, is the blend. And so much of finding that requires a new way of building, because the pain we ran into was that we'd have to do all this translation work. We'd have to figure out, well, how can we stress test without engineering in the loop and then somehow bring it back so the engineering can implement it. It was very complex, and it just drug out delivery timelines to get to something that felt really good. And so what the workflow engine really unlocked us in our ability to do is it really focused on the best of both worlds. It's what is engineering very good at and what are the non-engineers very good at, and how do you essentially bridge that gap where engineers can focus on making sure each individual piece runs effectively, that it's performant, that it's running in the correct order, that we find new ways of interacting or engaging with that data flow. And then on the non-engineering side, there's this kit of parts. They all work. You can magically wire them up together, and you can start to actually test your really complex ideas that, again, require that way of thinking that is maybe closer to art than science, right? It's a lot more of a creative exercise than it is like a scientific by the book exercise. That's how the workflow engine was born. And I think the proof is kind of in what we were able to pull off with it. I mean, we were able to do some really complex flows that are novel and exciting and would have only been possible by building the tools that let non-engineers interact with all of this complex logic.
If I could jump in, I'd also add something that's been really important to the way that we build is building hand in hand with our customers. So it's not that necessarily we were pushing out delivery dates, is that we were delivering and then we wanted to iterate, test again. And so with the workflow engine, we're able to do that work very rapidly and really meet the business case, get it out into the wild, get it into the hands of customers, see what's working, what's not working, and make adjustments without slowing it down with another eng cycle. So our eng team is focused, as Jack said, on that really important underlying architecture, while Jack as a product leader, myself as an operations leader, are able to work together and hand in hand with our customers to build the best possible experience.
That's great. And so you all went from serving more individual creators and authors and experts, enabling them to connect with their audiences on a deeper level and scale their content. And then once you opened up that underlying workflow engine under the hood, I understand there's more interest from larger orgs and brands. So what has this all led to in terms of the big news, the transition you're at now?
Well, we are shutting down the Remix products and we're really focusing on the workflows. And so we've seen the value for ourselves with the workflow engine and how easy it's been for us as a super tiny team to scale up incredibly, frankly, impressive business logic. There's things that we're able to do that larger companies have not been able to pull off specifically because of the way we've built this tech. And we've been lucky enough to attract a lot of attention around that, which is super exciting. And we are, entertaining conversations about bringing that tech in-house, because one of the things that we heard a lot, especially as we started to talk more about the workflow engine, is the value that this could bring, especially to a larger organization, where you can imagine that if you've been building a certain way, the same way we were building 12 months ago, there's a lot of potential value you could unlock for your customers if you empower anyone on the team to start to test, how can we make this experience more magical? What are the other types of value that we can introduce with the pace of, change in AI? How can we stay up to speed with where the latest advancements are happening? And so, yes, we are shutting down the Remix product, but we're super excited to be in discussions with folks around picking up our workflow engine, because our primary focus is driving kind of the most amount of value and good that we can with what we've built. And so we're really excited, honestly, about some of the things we've been talking to folks about, helping them with.
Super exciting. And I'm sure it's a challenge to navigate that journey of going through those deal discussions and sunsetting a product. Well, I'm just curious for the people listening, especially those looking to build an AI startup or an AI product. Just want to share some learnings, because there's obviously the stats floating around about 90% of products fail or whatever, but it's still a huge challenge to navigate sunsetting that product, and winding it down can be very difficult. So what, beyond what you just shared, like what led to the decision to sunset it versus, pushing ahead on that pursuit of product market fit, throwing more money at the problem or raising another round? Like, paint me a picture of the the room where it happened, so to speak, and what sort of discussions happen there in making that decision?
Well, it's a complicated decision, and I'm not sure I can get into all the nuance that'll make you happy about digging into every single piece of it. But I'll tell you that one bit of signal that we have gotten consistently with the workflow engine of this would be incredible. We would love it on-prem. We want this as something that we can do in-house. We want to be able to set this up with our own data flows. There's all of these kind of if this, then that, and that to deliver on. And certainly there's a scenario where, we could have gone and, just focused on delivering all that value. But, we were looking at how can we get this implemented as quickly as possible internally with someone doing fantastic work so that we can have the biggest possible impact. And that's honestly at its core kind of what it came down to. I mean, there's a bunch of nuance in, like I mentioned earlier, and all of the decision making that leads to that as the outcome. We really believe in what we have. Like the workflow engine is super impressive, and everyone we demo it to is comes away. It's just exciting because the thing that you see on all the demo calls is like all the gears turning, right? It's, oh, I have these three things I would like to never do again. This seems like it fits that mold. I mean, that's really exciting. And, for us as a personal decision, it's really around how we can, best bring that value to the new company.
Awesome. It was very exciting. And thank you for sharing that. Well, I know you're both very immersed in the everything AI industry and constantly learning. It feels like you obviously still believe in the huge potential of AI to have this positive impact. Can you share, and I'd love to hear from each of you, but can you share why you're so confident in the future of AI and where you see this type of technology going next?
I mean, it's the same excitement that I think I had looking at the original Chat GPT release, or even GPT-2. Like, there's so much opportunity. There's also a lot of potential risk, right? But the opportunity of what you can do to empower people to deliver beyond what they could do alone or what they could do on smaller teams. And when I say that, I also want to be very clear that I'm not setting the expectation or of the belief that because these tools exist, suddenly the baseline for human capacity is like 10x, and so you should be delivering 10x work, and that's the expectation. I'm not saying that because I think that it gets thrown around and it's great. Now you just expect me to get paid the same amount of money and to do 10 times the work. It's not about that. And I want to be super clear on that. The key is actually unlocking creative people and teams to do things they want to do outside of the scope of what they currently can do. Does that make sense? Right. So it's about you have ambition to do something that you currently don't have the time or resources to pull off, but you want to do it because it is a key part of how you think about building or delivering what you do. And it's grinding your gears that you cannot do it right now because you don't have the time and you actually wish that you could spend time doing that. That is where I think AI has a big opportunity, because then you as an individual or as a small team or a larger team can find how you can balance, right? It's not the AI just does everything for you on any of the spectrum here. It's actually about how you can guide options to get to a fantastic solution for whatever it is that exercise, whatever that exercise leads to for you. And so that's the way I think about it. That's what gets me very optimistic about the implementation of this stuff, because, just having everything done to the, bare minimum of whatever the current state of thinking or logic is in these different fields, it robs it of the humanities piece, right? And I think the best work people do is when you bring in those different perspectives. And so that's what gets me excited about it.
Appreciate that. Yeah, and I mean, you're preaching to the converted because as a career-long creative type copywriter, marketer, there's so many things that I wish I could focus my brain power on that's by the end of the day it's depleted because of all the little menial things that you have to do and administrative burden. So I totally appreciate that. Stephanie, what's your vision for the future of AI and how this technology can make an impact?
Yeah, it's funny because we just published to our LinkedIn feeds today my conversation with the incredible Dave Jimison, who has a product studio where they do advising and product development for companies on thinking about how to bring AI in-house. And my whole conversation with Dave was prompted because he had posted on LinkedIn that productivity is the wrong metric. And, initially I was like, well, like to, both of your points just now, our day is like 100% overwhelmed with all the blocking and tackling of just doing the work. And we don't have the freedom to do the stuff that we really want to do. So I would argue that productivity is an excellent metric. But he and I connected for a chat. And, what came out was two things. One was accessibility. So just acknowledging and how much freedom to create and build and try new things that lots of different kinds of people have in an AI era. There's no more blocks when it comes to language or time or resources. You can really, with an AI partner with automated workflows, really just do a lot more no matter who you are, which is incredible. And then two, the other big metric that Dave brought up that I was excited about, which felt a little touchy-feely at the time, but I think is important, is liberation. And so Dave, emphasized this idea that we are, and actually I heard this when I interviewed Peter Hollins as well, we are whole, complete people. We have families and creative passions, and we like being outdoors, and we like reading poetry, whatever it is. This idea of freeing ourselves up, not just to do more work, but freeing ourselves up to do more of the things that we love and feed our whole soul and our whole spirit. So very excited about this space and the potential for all of that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Switching gears a little bit on the journey and what you both learned, because I know obviously you mentioned sunsetting the Remix product and pivoting to the workflow engine. Let's unpack some of those lessons learned from, I hate to say the word failure, but like those pivots. What's the biggest key lesson each of you learned that surprised you from this whole product journey?
I mean, everybody says it all the time, and I actually think we did a pretty good job of it, but it's like speed to learning, right? It's like how quickly can you get a test in flight to find out whether there's signal? And sometimes you just keep running tests where you're not getting the right signal you're looking for, or you get some signal, but it doesn't have staying power. So, I mean, that's always really key. More high level, frankly, like just market early and often, even if it's not quite right. I think, not to your horn, but, working with you, even in this kind of, condensed period has been really fantastic because you need to be able to actively communicate your value, and to do that often and authentically. And Stephanie and I are both hopefully come off as authentic. We feel authentic. We feel connected and to our customers and what we love, and how we kind of drive what we do. And, working with you has really unlocked, I think, a lot of that for us. And we've seen clear momentum from it as we've, been working with you, and just getting that message out. So I would just say, in general, be a marketer, obviously, think like a marketer or work with an amazing marketer, but treat it as that means of ultimately what is that conversation you're looking to have with customers. Stephanie and I previously, we were doing the founder-led sales approach. So it was, getting on calendars, warm intros, cold outreach, et cetera, et cetera. And, there's a variable hit rate on that unless you really systemize it and treat it in a certain way. And even when you do that, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to lead to success. So I think the sooner you can put a regimen in place around how you go to market and that marketing piece, even if you change, right? Just be flexible enough to adapt, but have those core pillars, I think, is super important and impactful regardless of what you do. And yeah, no, I mean, I go back and Stephanie and I still go back and forth on this actually. So there's no real right answer on this yet, but you know, we went after the niche that we had signal and data on, and the one that we really connected with. And I think you also have to pick your niches really effectively in the tooling that you choose to, or whatever problem you're looking to solve and who you're looking to solve it for, because ultimately it's got to be scalable, right? And I think like the workflow engine, the benefit of it is also, I think, the hardest selling point, which is, it's really hard to sell an anything machine, right? That you can just kind of apply your own business logic and thoughts to. And that felt harder as a sales pitch, because who do you really target and focus on, and how do you find that fit? And that was why we went in on the content remix side and really focused on where we thought we'd have the biggest possible impact on that aspect of it, even though we had built the workflow engine for ourselves. And, run tests around the stuff you don't think will scale too. I mean, like the big lesson or eye opener for me, even of just the last few weeks of pushing the workflow engine, has been, wow, there actually is a real fit here from all these different companies, and there is a specific message to be had around this. And there's a set of clear requirements and connection around it. You make the best decisions you can at any given time, and it's the best you can hope for. As long as you're operating from a perspective of how can you have the biggest possible impact you can, and you're getting the right input, and you're trying to make the right decisions, and you're at least learning at each step, that's kind of all you can hope for.
Yeah, I'm glad you came around to the workflow engine at the end there, Jack, because that, I think, for me, looking back, and they say hindsight is 2020, but I think when we first had the call with Anne and talking about doing the TA bot for Gretchen's team, I mean, that was such an obvious win. That was like a direct application of the workflow engine. We knew that while it wasn't scalable because it was custom work, it was not arduous and ultimately could be scaled. And I think if we had paused and thought about, okay, who are 10 other Gretchens, can we get intros to them right now? And then just thought about, could we build TA bot or something like that for 10 other course creators that are huge? That would have been an interesting experiment to run. I know we were doing so much cold outreach and warm intros and demos, and I know it feels one other thing to add into the pot, but that is one that maybe I feel like we could have maybe double clicked on for sure.
Yeah, by the way, the reason why we didn't do that immediately is because we had run all of these tests around the different kind of the chatbot, the social feed, the lead capture, the analytics piece. I didn't even get into that actually. There was a whole rich analytics pipeline and analysis piece to kind of add that additional value on the usage to really spot trends amongst your audience, which is really cool stuff. But that wasn't working. And so we had the real existential moment of like, we don't have an immediate answer as to what we should work on after this. Like the content remix piece came through conversations, but some of those conversations, even at that time, were around, maybe we should, pack it up and find a different home, because we've tested a lot of our theses and it hadn't really worked in what we were trying to do. And through those conversations, we found the content remix piece in addition to the workflow engine. I mean, that was honestly through that discussion. And so it came together super rapidly, honestly, after a little bit of wandering in the wilderness. And it's sometimes you run into that stuff. I mean, it's tough. It's just really hard. This whole exercise is really hard. My advice to other AI founders is it's only going to get harder. Oh, it's going to get much harder.
Yeah, I mean, lots of stuff to unpack there, but first off, thank you for the kind words. That means a lot. But just to recap, learnings: test and learn quickly, build a framework of experimentation, market early and often, authentically, niche down, don't be an anything machine. As we all know, trying to be all things to all people results in being nothing to nobody. And then you mentioned in the early days, do things that don't scale, and then we'll figure out how to scale them ideally with workflows and cool tools like that. And then through that process of experimentation, double down on what works and see if you can repeat it consistently. This is all really helpful tips for people. I'm curious also on the learning side, what was the hardest moment of this journey for each of you? How did you manage the emotional toll that comes with running a business especially in an industry like AI, where everything's, you build something on Monday and then by Wednesday it's like obsolete, how do you manage that roller coaster in this industry?
I mean, this whole exercise is hard. I mean, honestly, the hardest moment was probably the transition from our last product to Astral, because we had scaled up to support that product. And then we realized, okay, we have some signal. We were scaling based on that signal, but it wasn't going to scale the way we needed it to. And we had to do a reduction in force, which sucked. Like, it's all about the people. Like, ultimately, this is just an exercise in building incredible things with great people and hoping that you build enough value to ultimately grow and scale with those people and to have everybody get a fantastic outcome because it's the reflection of the caliber of work you've done as a team. And so whenever you have to make a change to the team, it's the worst thing in the world because it's your colleagues, it's people you've worked with, it's people that, bought into the vision and wanted to see it work. And sometimes it doesn't work. That's by far the hardest part. And my advice, my counter advice to that is, especially now, just be very selective about how you scale, be super tempered in your strategy around who you work with and what they do and how many people you really want to have on the team to accomplish your goals. Because I mean, it sucks to be on the other side of it. And I'm not trying to talk about not like shrinking the job market or anything like that, but it's more about
intentional growth.
It's about intentional growth and not just filling roles because there's like a playbook of how you fill certain roles when you see certain metrics or how things grow. Just don't add a new person into the equation until someone else on the team is incredibly uncomfortable and you need to relieve the pressure. And I'm not saying that you should create uncomfortable positions for people, but that is a signal. That's information that says, hey, we either need to change the way we're doing this or we need help. And that's a totally normal, good way to manage it. I don't know. Stephanie, do you disagree?
Yeah, no, I would add, I think team is always a signal, team is a great one. I would add though, growth, when you realize you have a blind spot or there's something you're actively not going after because you don't have the capacity, whether it's talent or headcount. And if you can add that headcount because you want to add more talent, add more expertise, then you should. I think it's interesting. We've talked to so many founders lately, and I think a mistake that founders make, it goes both ways. It's scaling up too quick, growing your team too quick, ending up with too many people. But it goes the other way too, where it's like you're nervous to grow, you're nervous to bring on the right talent, or maybe you do the playbook where you go contractor by contractor because you're concerned about making like a real commitment. And I think maybe the theme of the conversation is, being mindful and authentic and really looking at where you are and where you want to be. And then what is it going to take to get there? I think that's how you answer those questions.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And it coincidentally brings me to my next question. You mentioned being authentic. I understand that a lot of the driving force behind building Astral was building authentically in the AI space. What does that look like? How do we ensure that AI-driven products maintain ethics and integrity at their core and not just making stuff for the sake of making stuff and getting more done with less? What's your take on building authentically?
The power is you. It's all just a reflection of the people building them. So if you're good, if you're a good person who is empathetic and connected to the people they work with and their customers in a way that they deeply understand them and want to support them, then you will build from a place of empathy and thoughtfulness and value. And that'll just be reflected in the product. I mean, I think that's really the core of it. It's not more complicated than that.
Yeah, I've become kind of obsessed with AI use cases lately. Like anytime I see like a case study, I'm like, I can't, I'm like a bag of chips. I just need to go and read it. And it's, it when you see it. Like I've noticed a lot, like lately a theme has been around inbox management. And, just a great example I saw the other day was just making it easier for doctors to communicate with their patients about medical stuff. It's like very obvious. And the AI aha was not having the AI write the email for the doctor. It was helping the doctor sort and make sure that only the emails that were going to the doctor were the ones that the doctor needed to see. And that ones about scheduling or about prescription refills or whatever, were getting air traffic controlled by the AI to other places. And in that way, thinking about ethics and authenticity and really delivering value for, you've got a two-sided marketplace there, right? You've got your doctors and their patients. It's a clear win. Again, you know it when you see it. There's plenty of cases where you're like, if it feels dodgy, my motto is it probably is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great case study as well, and just useful.
Great example of a workflow engine.
Yeah, and you're not, eliminating doctors or receptionists. You're just alleviating some of that administrative burden, like you mentioned earlier. So, last question, and this is a bigger existential one, but for entrepreneurs looking to enter the Gen AI space and build something like you've built, what would be your top advice or actionable tips about building an AI company in the next, let's say, year or two?
I think folks are going to have to be really ambitious. That's my take. I think if you want to start a new company, you're going to have to take on a problem that it would seem ridiculous that a small team could actually solve. And the reason I say that is because I fully believe these workflow engine tools will get a lot better and will get more broadly available to where businesses have them and they can start to use them and will want to like easily put that work into practice. And so I see those workflows as the nicheification of AI for specific problems because it'll be a direct reflection of what that company or business or entrepreneur needs to solve. And the building blocks of that, I don't think will be that complex for the majority of use cases. And so if you're looking to swing, you got to swing big, I think. And, I'll give an example of a company I think that's doing amazing stuff that not only focused on a niche, but then swung really big for that niche is like pseudo write. Like they built a tool specifically for fiction authors to go through and produce high quality novels. And it's a tool that extends the way people think about writing. And then they just, as a small team, put out their own model specifically built around narrative. And the results are super high quality, like way beyond what you see on any of the kind of generalized models. I think you're going to have to do something like that. I think you're going to have to not only focus on that experience of the act of creation or processing of whatever it is that that business or niche does do, but then you're going to have to kind of go above and beyond and pull some rabbits out of hats, I think, and deliver way beyond your scope. And if you're not that ambitious, I think it's just a high likelihood of failure given the speed of progress and change.
Just to be totally contrarian. I kind of wonder if this is an age of absolute freedom and experimentation and creativity. Like the stakes are so much lower when it comes to creating something for all the reasons we've discussed. It's so much easier to try something, see if it works, put it out there, put it in front of one person, 10 people, 100 people. And you can go swing big, but as we know, it's hard and it's also more prone to big fails. And I love pseudo write because I do feel like part of that is niching down. I think that's a great example. But I think also another way to niche down is with tiny experiments, just creating something, putting it out there, seeing the way it resonates. And the reason I'm saying all this is I'm thinking back to the last big sort of web development, app development boom. And that's what a lot of it was. It was a lot of people just being inspired about little apps on your phone or, silly websites that could do fun little things for you. And that's where a lot of the big things that we do today came from and are coming back, by the way, too.
Can I add to that? Because your original question was about AI companies. My follow-up answer to completely concur with Stephanie is if you're not building an expressly AI company, you
Yeah.
should be using all of these
Yeah.
tools to
Yeah.
build fun, cool, weird stuff and getting audience for it because the barrier to entry is super low. And I think it'll be very difficult to build an AI company that stands out, but it will not be difficult to have an opinion and to express your personality and your creative implementation around some other idea that is niched or specific or fun or weird. And there is going to be this Cambrian explosion of fun, weird, cool stuff again, which is super exciting because we have been stuck in a rut, I think, on the internet
Yeah.
with all of these incredibly boring, formatted, specific feeds, essentially, of exactly how people engage with stuff. And I think we're going to get weird again. And I think you will find the app site experience for you in a way that we've never really seen before. Because, in the last age of it, you had to know what you were doing entirely to figure out how to get these things made. And Now you kind of don't. You can come in and you could know nothing. You could literally draw an example of what you want on a piece of paper and say, please make this for me, and it will work. And so I think in that answer, which is not the original question, but I would say it might be tough to build an AI company. It might be incredible to start to get any idea or concept you have about how you can fix or improve something or just creatively express yourself using technology. I think that's going to get huge. That's super exciting.
100%. To like get weird as the
Get
no,
weird. Call to
get
arms.
weird. Get weird. I mean, all those, as you said, Zach, it's like the million ideas you have at the end of the day, it can be real, which does remind me, I was teaching teenagers how to code in the early aughts, and it reminds me of that. I remember when I was using Dreamweaver, guys, remember Dreamweaver to make websites, and I learned how to use Flash. Like it feels like that, where it was like suddenly like you can just like move blocks around and people were making like silly animations just because they could. Yeah, I'm excited.
You just brought me back. Yeah, it's like we've been talking about. There's no excuse anymore to not make the thing that's in your head, um, which is
Correct.
super exciting. It's also scary and weird, but I think that's a great note to end on. Let's get weird. Everybody should experiment rapidly and just try stuff out and see if you could bring your ideas to life. Well,
Yeah, it's the opposite of the slop argument.
yeah.
It's not
Um,
slop, it's weird.
well, I think that was a wonderful piece of advice to end on and inspirational. I really enjoyed being part of this journey, albeit a small part, and learned a lot from you both. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you, Zach.
We'll have a great day.